The ink on my son's marriage certificate was barely dry when my new daughter-in-law started mentally rearranging my furniture. My name is Martha. I am 65 years old, a widow for a decade, and I live in a spacious paid-off home with a wraparound porch and a lush garden. Sarah, my son David's new wife, likes to call it a villa when she brags to her friends. On their wedding day, Sarah made sure the ushers seated me in the third row, tucked behind her distant cousins. David simply looked down at his polished shoes when I caught his eye. He had always been passive, easily molded by whoever spoke the loudest in the room. I didn't shed a tear or cause a scene. I merely observed the dynamic, drank my sparkling water, and left before the cake was cut. I knew exactly who Sarah was calculating, pragmatic and hungry for a shortcut in life. The real trouble began a mere 3 days after their honeymoon. I was pruning my hydrangeas when a moving truck backed into my driveway. David stepped out, rubbing the back of his neck, while Sarah marched up my walkway carrying a designer tote bag. "We had a slight issue with our apartment lease, Mom," David muttered, refusing to meet my gaze. "We just need to crash here for a little while. Only until we find a new place." Sarah offered a tight, practiced grin. "It makes financial sense, Martha. Why pay rent when you have all these empty rooms?" I wiped the dirt from my gardening gloves. I didn't offer a warm hug or a comforting speech about family. Instead, I picked up my shears and looked straight at Sarah. "The guest room is the second door on the left," I replied evenly. "Do not park your cars on the grass." I knew this was a test, and I knew the war for my home had just begun. The very next morning, the boundaries were tested. I woke up at 6, my usual time, and walked out to the kitchen to brew coffee. I found Sarah standing in the hallway, staring at the closed door of the master bedroom. My bedroom. "Martha, I was thinking," Sarah began, crossing her arms. "The guest room is a bit cramped for 2 adults. Since you're alone, it would make more sense for David and me to take the master suite. We have a lot more clothes." I poured my coffee, letting the steam rise between us. I didn't yell. I didn't argue about respect or my years of hard work paying off the mortgage. "No," I answered simply. Sarah blinked clearly, taken aback by the single syllable. "Excuse me. It's just practical. You don't need all that space." "The master bedroom is mine," I countered, taking a sip from my mug. "If the guest room is too cramped, I suggest you start looking for an apartment today." Her face flushed. She spun around and stomped back to the guest room, slamming the door. 10 minutes later, David shuffled into the kitchen, looking exhausted. "Mom, did you really have to be so harsh to Sarah? She's just trying to get comfortable," he mumbled, pouring himself a cup. "My comfort comes first in my house, David," I stated, locking eyes with him. "You are guests here." That afternoon, while they were out at work, I called a locksmith. By the time they returned my master bedroom, my home office and the basement storage had brand new high-security deadbolts. I handed David a single silver key when he walked through the front door. "Front door only," I noted calmly. Sarah glared at the shiny new lock on my bedroom door as she walked past. The gloves were off, but I was the one controlling the arena. When direct confrontation failed, Sarah switched to subtle sabotage. It started with small things. My reading glasses would vanish from the coffee table and reappear in the refrigerator. The mail I left on the counter would be shoved into random kitchen drawers. "Are you sure you didn't just forget, Martha?" Sarah asked one evening, her voice dripping with fake concern. "You've been so forgetful lately. It's natural at your age." David looked up from his dinner plate, his brow furrowed. "Mom, you did leave the stove on yesterday. Sarah had to turn it off." I paused, my fork hovering over my salad. I knew for a fact I hadn't cooked anything on the stove yesterday. I had eaten a cold sandwich for lunch and went out with a friend for dinner. They were trying to paint a picture of a frail, confused old woman. It was a classic manipulation tactic. I didn't defend myself. I didn't try to convince David that his wife was lying. Arguing with a manipulator only gives them the reaction they crave. Noted, I replied calmly, taking a bite of lettuce. The next morning, while they were asleep, I ordered 3 discrete motion-activated cameras online. I installed one in the kitchen, one in the living room, and one pointing at the front door. I also bought a small leather-bound notebook. I began logging every interaction, every misplaced item, and every passive-aggressive comment. I documented the dates, times, and exactly what was said. A few days later, Sarah loudly complained that I had misplaced the spare car keys. I quietly walked to my office, checked the footage on my tablet, and watched a video of Sarah kicking the keys under the living room sofa. I didn't confront her with the video. Not yet. I just smiled, walked to the sofa, retrieved the keys, and dropped them onto the kitchen island. "Found them," I announced. The look of sheer panic on her face was worth every penny I spent on those cameras. With her gaslighting attempts failing, Sarah shifted her focus to a more tangible target, my finances. Years ago, when my husband passed, I had added David to one of my secondary checking accounts just in case of an emergency. It wasn't my main retirement fund, but it held a significant cushion. I was reviewing my bank statements online when I noticed a pending withdrawal for $5,000. The description read, "Boutique Interior Design." I closed my laptop, grabbed my purse, and drove straight to the bank. I didn't call David to demand an explanation. I didn't confront Sarah. I simply sat down with the branch manager, a woman I had known for 15 years. "I need to remove David's name from this account immediately," I instructed, "and freeze any pending transactions from the last 24 hours. Within 20 minutes, the money was back, the account was solely in my name, and David's debit card was permanently deactivated. I was reading a novel on the porch when they came home that evening. Sarah's face was stormy, her heels clicking aggressively against the concrete steps. "Did you cancel the card?" she demanded, bypassing any greeting. "My payment for the new living room furniture declined. It was embarrassing." I slowly lowered my book. "New living room furniture. Yes, this house needs an update," she snapped. "We were going to surprise you. You tried to spend $5,000 of my money without asking." I corrected her, keeping my voice level. David stepped forward, looking entirely miserable. "Mom, we were going to pay you back eventually. We just needed to get the house ready for the future. There is no we when it comes to my bank accounts," I firmly stated. "The account is closed. Do not ever try to access my funds again, or you will be packing your bags tonight." Sarah turned on her heel and stormed inside. They were running out of options, and I knew a desperate move was coming next. The atmosphere in the house grew thick with unspoken resentment. Sarah stopped talking to me entirely, communicating only in sharp sighs and eye rolls. David avoided me, spending most of his time hiding in the guest room. I went about my routine undisturbed gardening, reading, and enjoying my own space. On a Tuesday afternoon, I was in the kitchen baking bread when the doorbell rang. I wiped my hands on an apron and walked to the foyer. Standing next to Sarah was a slick-looking man in a tailored suit holding a leather clipboard. "Martha," Sarah began, her voice overly sweet. "This is Mr. Higgins. He's an appraiser. David and I are looking into upgrading the homeowner's insurance, and he just needs to take a quick look around the villa." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. Upgrading my insurance. They didn't pay a dime towards this house. I glanced at the clipboard in the man's hand. The logo at the top belonged to a high-end real estate agency, not an insurance firm. "Insurance, you say?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, just standard procedure." The man chimed in with a practiced smile. "If you'll just let me measure the square footage." I didn't move an inch. This house is fully insured, and it is not on the market. I suggest you leave my porch before I consider you a trespasser, Mr. Higgins." The man looked at Sarah, confused. Sarah's fake smile completely vanished, her jaw tightening. "Martha, you're being paranoid again. Your memory is slipping. We are just trying to help." "My memory is sharp enough to read a real estate logo, Sarah." I countered, staring her down. "Goodbye, Mr. Higgins." I shut the door in his face and turned the deadbolt. Sarah stood in the hallway, her chest heaving with anger. She had shown her hand. They weren't just trying to control me. They were actively trying to sell my home out from under me. It was time for me to end this game. I didn't wait for them to orchestrate another scheme. The next morning, Sarah and David left early for a weekend trip to her parents' house. They claimed they needed a break from the tension. It was the perfect window of opportunity. As soon as their car disappeared down the street, I went into the guest room. I pulled their designer suitcases from the closet and began packing. I didn't throw their belongings. I folded every shirt and neatly arranged every pair of shoes. I packed away her expensive cosmetics and his video games. I emptied the bathroom of their toiletries. Once everything was packed, I dragged the suitcases into the garage. I gathered all the mail they had redirected here, put it in a neat pile on top of the luggage, and locked the door leading from the garage into the house. Then I walked into my home office and opened my personal safe. I pulled out the original deed to the house. It bore only my name and my late husband's name. There was no trust, no joint ownership, no loopholes. I placed the deed in a manila folder alongside the printed bank statements, the flash drive containing the security footage of Sarah hiding my keys, and my leather-bound logbook. I spent the rest of the weekend entirely at peace. I baked a lemon tart, drank tea on the porch, and watched the birds in my garden. I felt no guilt. A mother's love does not require her to become a doormat for her child's greed. Sunday evening approached. I knew they would be returning soon, likely with whatever master plan they had cooked up with her family. I placed the manila folder on the dining room table, made myself a cup of Earl Grey, and waited. The trap they thought they were setting for me was about to snap shut on their own fingers. The front door opened just after sunset. I heard Sarah's heels clicking on the hardwood, followed by the heavy thud of David's boots. They walked into the dining room and stopped cold when they saw me sitting at the head of the table, sipping my tea. "You're up late?" Sarah noted, her voice carrying a bizarre, triumphant lilt. She was holding a thick, cream-colored envelope. David looked nervous, shuffling his weight from one foot to the other. "Hey, Mom, we need to talk to you about something important." I didn't offer them a seat. I just rested my hands on the manila folder in front of me. "I'm listening." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes gleaming with the confidence of someone who believes they've already won a chess match. "Martha, we've been very worried about you. Your memory lapses, the paranoia, the hostility. It's not safe for you to live in this big villa all alone anymore." "I am not alone," I corrected mildly. "You two have been living here." "Exactly, and it's taking a massive toll on our marriage," she shot back. "David agrees that you need professional, full-time care. We found a beautiful assisted living community. It has a garden bingo nights, everything you need." David finally spoke up, his voice shaking. "It's for your own good, Mom. The doctors..." "Well, we talked to some specialists and they said early intervention is key." They hadn't spoken to any doctors. I hadn't seen a doctor in 6 months, and my last checkup was flawless. They were relying entirely on the fake narrative Sarah had been spinning to the neighbors and to David. "I see," I murmured, keeping my expression entirely unreadable. "And how exactly do you plan to pay for this luxury community?" Sarah's smile widened, revealing all her teeth. She placed the cream-colored envelope on the table and slid it toward me. The moment of truth had finally arrived. I looked down at the envelope, then back up at Sarah. She tapped her manicured fingernail against the paper, her eyes shining with absolute arrogance. "You don't need to worry about the finances, Martha. We took care of everything," she announced cheerfully. I slowly opened the envelope and pulled out the thick stack of papers. They were perfectly bound, with sticky notes pointing to dotted lines. It was a power of attorney relinquishment, a nursing home admission contract, and a preliminary agreement for a property transfer. I ran my finger over the edge of the paper, taking my time. I read the headings out loud. Relinquishment of rights, transfer of deed, assisted living admission. Sarah crossed her arms, standing tall. "It's simpler this way. David is fully on board. You'll have medical staff activities, friends your own age. We will take over the property so it doesn't burden you anymore." I looked at David. He couldn't even make eye contact. He was staring at the floorboards, completely broken by her manipulation. I let the silence stretch. I let the weight of their betrayal fill the room until the air felt suffocating. Then I slid the papers back across the table, folded my hands, and looked Sarah dead in the eye. After the wedding, my daughter-in-law came to my door with a document: "We've already sold this villa. You're going to a nursing home." I said, "Perfect. But first, we're going to the district attorney's office." Sarah froze. The smug smile vanished from her face instantly. Her hands dropped to her sides. "What?" She breathed, the color draining from her cheeks. I didn't yell. My voice was as steady as a heartbeat. "Fraud, elder financial abuse, and attempted theft of property. Those are serious charges, Sarah. I wonder how your new husband will fare in a holding cell." David's head snapped up, his face pale with sheer terror. "Mom, what are you talking about? Nobody is going to the DA." I opened my manila folder and pushed my own documents across the table. First, the deed to the house, proving my sole ownership. Next, the logbook detailing every missing key, every gaslighting attempt, and every lie Sarah had told. Finally, I tossed the black flash drive onto the pile. High-definition video and audio. I explained coldly. Footage of you, Sarah, hiding my keys. Audio of you discussing how to drain my checking account. And a lovely clip of you turning away a real estate agent trying to appraise a house you do not own. Sarah stepped back, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You recorded me." "I protected myself," I corrected. "I am not frail, I am not forgetful, and I am certainly not going to a nursing home. You assumed I was a victim waiting to be slaughtered. You assumed wrong." I stood up from the table. "You've no legal right to this property, no medical authority over my health, and absolutely zero access to my money. The bluff is over." "Mom, please," David begged, stepping forward with his hands raised. "We didn't mean it like that. We just—" "Sarah thought—" "I don't care what Sarah thought," I interrupted sharply. "I packed your bags this morning. They are in the garage. I have already changed the locks on every door in this house." I picked up the silver garage key from the counter and tossed it at David's chest. He fumbled to catch it. "You have 5 minutes to retrieve your luggage from my garage and get off my property," I commanded. "If you are not gone in 5 minutes, I will make good on my promise and the authorities will hear the audio on that drive." Sarah didn't say another word. She grabbed David's arm and dragged him toward the door, utterly defeated. The heavy oak front door clicked shut, and the deadbolt slid into place with a satisfying thud. Through the front window, I watched them load their suitcases into the trunk of their car in dead silence. Sarah refused to look back at the house, her pride entirely shattered. David lingered for a moment, staring at the porch before getting into the passenger seat. They drove away into the night. The next week was the most peaceful I had experienced in months. I didn't receive any frantic phone calls from David, nor did any lawyers or police officers show up. Manipulators like Sarah operate in the shadows. They crumble the moment a bright light is shined on their actions. The threat of exposure was all it took to make her vanish. 2 weeks later, David came by alone. He stood on the porch, looking exhausted, asking if we could talk. I didn't unlock the screen door. "I'm filing for divorce," he admitted quietly, staring at the porch planks. "She tried to open a credit card in my name when we got to her parents' house. I was stupid, Mom. I'm so sorry." "You were foolish, David," I replied evenly. A stranger disrespect your mother in her own home because it was easier than standing up for what was right. "Can I come in?" he asked, his voice cracking. "No," I answered. "You can call me next week and we will meet at a coffee shop. You have a lot of growing up to do before you sit at my dining table again." He nodded slowly, accepting the boundary, and walked back to his car. I locked the door, walked into my kitchen, and poured a fresh cup of tea. I stepped out onto my back patio, looking over the garden I had nurtured for 20 years. The villa was quiet. The villa was mine. And it was absolutely perfect. Here's the biggest lesson from Martha's story. You never have to attend every argument you're invited to. When someone is committed to manipulating you, explaining yourself is just a waste of breath. True strength doesn't always mean screaming or causing a scene. Sometimes it looks like quiet observation, gathering your facts, and setting unbreakable boundaries. Blood might make someone family, but it doesn't give them a free pass to disrespect you, especially under your own roof. Protect your peace. Know what you bring to the table, and never be afraid to show someone the door the second they forget your worth. If you loved seeing Martha stand her ground and take back her peace, hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell notification. We share powerful real-life stories like this every single week. What would you have done if you were in Martha's shoes? Would you have packed their bags sooner? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your thoughts. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I'll see you in the next story.